So we have a lot of new information to share in today's update. So hey everyone, how's it going today? And welcome back to another update. So the big thing that's going on is that, as most of you guys know, is that right now at this current time, they are now officially reviving not just the Build Back Better plan, but simply put as stimulus programs that most of us hopefully care about, that is meant to put money in our pockets. But the big goal right now is that they're really going to be taking this package and trying to now split it officially into different parts. We did already talk a lot about that in the last video, so I'll definitely put that at the very end screen. It'll be on the bottom if you're interested in checking out. But the big thing that I really want to talk about in today's update is really talking a lot more now about the pandemic, but even more specifically about the Omicron situation. Because at the end of the day, this is probably going to be one of the most important things that is going to impact the situation with stimulus. And because at the end of the day, the reason we even got just stimulus packages in general is because of the pandemic, and then of course with Omicron it's just adding to it. Now we do have maybe one quick great news to really share real fast, which is the fact that there are now a lot of scientists that have officially now started to come out, and they have spoken about how they do see positive upside in the sense of seeing Omicron starting to level very soon. And this is actually very important, because even though I know most of us are probably just focused about trying to get money in our pockets, at the end of the day, this is one of the most impactful things, and it's going to potentially impact a lot of people financially, because if we start to see cases rise, it's going to impact things that are potentially even more important than money. Things such as like jobs, lifestyle, health, both physical and mental. And it's just something that I think is very important, even beyond all of the financial stuff. Even though we are a finance channel, it's just something to know. But we're going to talk about everything in today's update. So real fast, as always, before we begin, consider smashing the like button, consider subscribing and hitting the bell, although you guys can decide, but I do think it'll hopefully be some cool stuff to share. And as always, feel free to comment any questions, personal thoughts about honestly just anything. So with that being said, let's get this video started. So maybe to start a little bit about the Omicron situation is really the fact that the really great news is that even though, yes, right now at this time, we are still seeing cases rise up, the great news is that it's starting to level off a little bit. And I do know is that Dr. Fauci and many other scientists, what they've also officially come out to speak and say is that they do believe it's probably going to peak and now really start to flatten, hopefully by something around the second half of February. So we're really only 2 weeks away, which is wild. We're almost done with the very first month of this year. How fast time flies. So the idea is that what he's pretty much just trying to preach right now is to really get people to focus really on 4 things, which is going to essentially be to just focus on trying to improve vaccines. Now, I do know, again, there's obviously a lot of controversy, so this is not to try to push or not push anyone to get the vaccine. This is just communicating as a messenger what he physically wants to do right now. So the focus is that he really wants to preach trying to get more people vaccinated. He does also want to send out more test kits, and you guys have probably seen all over the news or just all over the place right now is that they are starting to send out free test kits. Maybe I'll put a link down below or something like that if I see it, to where you guys can sign up, although most people already know about it. He does want to still encourage people to wear masks, at least until the weather gets warmer. And in a lot of ways, the masks, if you live in a location that's relatively cold, it can actually be sometimes useful for just keeping your faces warm. I know it's a little bit funny, but it is just something that is technically very much true. And he also just wants to get a lot of people that are going through some particular set of circumstance to really be able to get therapy or treatment. So what it really is that he just wants to improve the hospital system and just give services to help people that particularly need help, because they're particularly more susceptible to catching the pandemic and everything related to that. And then really actually outside of the US, I think it's also important to note is that if you leave the United States, that's when there actually becomes a lot more variation to how the rest of the world is doing. There are some countries, like for example India, where they're starting to see cases truly like exponentiate. So it is really just different over there. I do notice China is starting to send out many restrictions once again, so they're also on the rise. And then Europe is kind of just depends on the specific country within Europe, but I do know that within Europe there are certainly several countries that are now starting to do lockdowns. So while cases may have just somewhat been stable, it's definitely been a massive impact in terms of lifestyle. And then however I do notice is that there are some places, so for example like Canada, that did technically kind of temporary lockdown parts of it, but the great news is that they actually are doing their own version of the stimulus check within Canada and several countries that have locked down for their particular people. But as a whole, I think the big idea is that the US is starting to at least see some leveling when it comes to just the pandemic. And certainly one thing for sure is that we haven't actually officially locked down at this current time, and I think that they're trying their best to keep as much open as possible. Of course, you guys can feel free to share your particular opinions about whether or not you think we should go into another lockdown or not, because it's a very mixed opinion situation. Now, in terms of how everything that we just mentioned is probably going to potentially impact the stuff that most of us care the most about, which is essentially everything related to fourth stimulus checks, unemployment, child tax credit, or just social programs meant to put money in our pockets, the big idea is that what's probably going to really determine what we physically go is going to be a couple of factors. The first is probably a lot more about how the actual pandemic goes now going forward. There's a very probable chance we maybe see another brand new variant. There's a probable chance maybe everything goes according to plan and we actually very much do actually see things start to level off in the middle of February. So there's that. The other big thing is also about the economic level, and it's really the fact that there are definitely a lot of politicians, especially since Omicron started, actually technically since the pandemic started in general, but particularly especially since the Omicron started, and even to this day, that are still trying to preach for more stimulus programs and dabbling on the idea of even doing stimulus checks, especially after the petition that just happened that we mentioned officially reached 3 million signatures. It is very subtle. That's why you may or may not have heard as much information about it, but it is something that's going on relatively on very local news behind the scenes. Probably the true new information to really share is that it is definitely out there. I will say though that they're definitely now making a lot of moves and definitely making progress in order to try to push for more fourth just stimulus programs in general, but specifically on a very targeted level. I do know is that there are some people that are potentially trying to preach to see if they can do some kind of stimulus program for people that potentially catch the pandemic. So for example, in New York, I do know, and I only say this because I'm in New York City, I know there's a lot of people there. There's actually interestingly a program right now in New York City where if by any chance you end up having to test positive for the pandemic, they're going to potentially give you guys free hotels, free food, free services, and essentially just money to help sustain during that time. So that is actually still at the end of the day relief, and this is really just something that represents one city. It is very probable that many other cities may start to join in, and there's going to be even newer programs to try to do focused stimulus checks, or just simply put free services or things to help out in general, depending on the person's particular circumstance, but really helping those that particularly really need it. And this is definitely something that I know Joe Manchin also very much supports, is that when it comes to things like the child tax credit, he's not necessarily against the child tax credit, but he just wants to make it very focused. So in other words, trying to limit the actual qualifications to who can actually physically get it. There's a lot of debate about that, but this is actually typically just the general direction that they're trying to head, not just for child tax credit. It's just that that happens to be the most famous program right now, but just stimulus programs in general. But really beyond this is that that's what I really just wanted to share in today's update. The big takeaway really is that we just have to start to see where things go forward from here. But the great news is at least the cases are starting to level off. At least they are now making progress when it comes to just fourth stimulus programs, as we mentioned about how they're breaking up the bills. So they're definitely at least trying to create more compromise, and that is the really great news. Of course, all of this is probably going to depend about a lot of the other economic stuff that's going on, such as like inflation, the stock market, the job market, unemployment, everything about that. I do know if by any chance you are looking for a new job, or you're looking to maybe seek just simply put, are actively trying to job hunt right now, I did make one video, which I'll also put at the very end screen on the upper part, that talks about just typical tips and tricks to finding work, to hopefully help out for people that are just trying to escape unemployment in general. And I think that can be a very life-changing thing. But beyond that is that that's what I really wanted to share. If you guys made it this far and haven't done so, maybe consider smashing the like button, consider subscribing, hitting the bell, and as always, feel free to comment any questions, personal thoughts, or maybe predictions about honestly anything. So that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, stay safe, stay well, and hope to see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much again.